long time since we did is a little dream pipe. So here we are. Sitting in the back garden of the new place, the Xiii in the Riverbend. We've got the autumn sun sitting right on my shoulder there. You can see it, you know. Nice to have a little bit of flair. We've got the pipe. Got a little bit of our favorite tobacco going on, adventure tobacco. So welcome to another Dream Pipes of Malachas Ivernus. Now, this time I thought that I would do a little bit about the idea of initiation. Now, this was actually a subject that has come up in dialogue, in an ongoing dialogue with the inimitable Tommy Kelly, he of the famous and infamous 40 Servants divination deck and magic system. Now, Tommy's great because he's always... That's brilliant, isn't it? That sun thing is really cool. Tommy's always starting interesting conversations. Now, of course, one might say this is merely social media strategy, a quest for engagement. But you know what? I think if we look at that phrase in its more fundamental meaning, the quest for engagement is actually kind of cool. I'm not talking about engagement with your posts or your profile or hit that like and share and follow button, all that stuff. No, the search for engagement, the quest for engagement is something we should all be concerned with. To be engaged, to be involved, to face things, take things on, embrace who we are, our place in time, our place in locality, and our responsibilities that gives us. If we disengage from this place and time and lose ourselves, for example, in social media feeds, we lose ourselves. We need to face our world and our circumstances as they are now. So engagement is important, not engagement with your content, engagement with your world. And I think that there are some people who cynically manipulate algorithms to, I don't know what, drive traffic. I don't know. If you want to direct traffic, go and stand at a crossroads. Rather, there are also people who do things that might be interpreted as, trying to generate engagement. But they're also doing the other kind. They're challenging people to engage with the world around them. And with that preamble said, the idea that we were talking about in our discussion was the idea of initiation. What does it mean in a magical, in a spiritual sense? And the question I sort of took as a prompt, and I ended up writing a little mini essay, as I sometimes do, in the comments. And then I often take these little things that other people's thoughts prompt me to think, and I will, expand them, flesh them out, turn them into something that I will share myself. But that's good, right? It has me in mind of Beckett's Endgame, where you've got Clove, who says to his master, father, jailer, what is there here that's worth staying for? And Ham's response is the dialogue. It's slightly different in French, where he says, "Pourquoi je suis là? Why am I here?" And Ham's answer is pour me donner la réplique, which literally means to answer me in the dialogue between actors. A réplique is an answer of one actor to another in a stage dialogue, so it's got that double meaning, referencing the fact that they are in a play themselves, and that the end game is not just the final stages of something, but it is also the end of the play. Anyway, the idea, rather than talking about endings, then, would be to talk about initiation and beginnings, which we shall now do. Tumbling smoke. Clouds and flare. Cloud puffballs, torn tufts. Sorry. I'm always tempted to just jump into a bit of poetry that I somehow have knocking around in my head. Anyway, what I wrote in response to the question was this, which I will sort of read but kind of try to flesh out as I go. As follows. Initiation. To me, it is a step across the threshold, a taking on of a new form of attention to the world, hard to go back upon, hard to rescind. Once it has been taken, nothing can ever be the same. It is best done in full knowledge and conscience of what the implications are, and I imagine even better done with a structure and support around one from others who are further on along the path one has chosen. Personally, I had neither luxury, neither the knowledge and conscience, nor the structure and support. I was alone, unprepared, and I did not fully measure the import of what was happening, or indeed the responsibility that I was taking on. I had no guides to teach, prepare, look out for me. There was no order or tradition behind me to look to, no fellow travellers to receive me in ritual, in circle, in community. Of course, this is very common these days. It used to be the case that initiation was only to be gained from an order or a coven or a group of some kind. But solitary practice and self-initiation has become almost the norm since the 90s. I think it was Scott Cunningham's Solitary Wiccan, which sort of, in a sense, gave people the permission. Said, look, you don't need someone else to tell you you're allowed. You don't need the seal of approval. You also don't need someone else to perform your initiation. As with many sacraments, the person who sort of leads the ritual isn't necessarily the one who's actually doing it. For example, in marriage, a priest performs the wedding, but the priest does not administer the sacrament. The couple administers the sacrament to each other. And that's an important distinction. Just because somebody is leading a ritual or facilitating it, it doesn't mean that it is only in their power. They may not be the one who is actually administering the sacrament. And so it is with initiation. The person who, might perform the initiation or confer the initiation, well, unless you're very tied up with ideas of lineage, which some people are, some traditions are very concerned with lineaged initiations. But really, it's the person who undergoes the initiation who is actually performing the sacrament, if you want to look at it as such. And I did not have other people, so I must do it myself. But of course, for me, I didn't even quite realize what was happening. Some people go through self-initiation with a lot of preparation and study, and they know exactly what they're doing, and they may even be, self-initiating into a particular tradition. But for me, there was none of that. I had no mentors, I had nobody. So actually it was very confusing at times, to be honest, even frightening. And other times, of course, it was wildly intoxicating, full of wonder, because I didn't know what was going on. All I had were just little hints, like scavenged pieces, bits and scraps of wisdom, just that I had to sort of cobble together into something resembling a path, a magical path. But I didn't know when I took the first steps along it that is what was happening. I suppose I was lucky in a way, because there were certain sort of key stages at which people did show up. And this was very strange. I think, many people will have had this experience. Sometimes people show up like signposts to point you along your path, and they seem to know more about you and about what is going on with you than they should, or than they let on, or than that even you know sometimes. And these people, these kind of guides, but they didn't go with me along the path, they just sort of pointed me in the right direction at certain points. And they seemed to want to give me this, just a little bit of cryptic kind of wisdom or knowledge or tech or tool or some little piece of gnosis or part of the puzzle that would help me, that I would need. And it turned into a sort of a quest, this long, strange quest, almost like a mystery play. At times, it seemed like these others around me, they knew the script, they knew the play that we were in, but I didn't know, and they weren't able or permitted to tell me. It's more for the visual effect than anything else. The smoke looks cool. So, obviously, this being the case, the whole thing was flawed, incomplete, I would say, to an extent traumatic because incomplete. Sometime later I came back, returned to that threshold, and this time, just like Percival, the knight in the Grail legends, I knew the question to ask of the Fisher King. The first time I had not known. When I came back, I'd studied, I'd practiced, I'd fortified myself, prepared myself, but that takes not away from the almost inexpressible pain of the first time, the time I failed. To be within reach of that thing, the thing, initiation, I suppose, to fail at the last hurdle, the last test, the last ordeal, and to see that light die and the gate slam shut, to have to walk away with that darkness and shame, to feel broken, and that sense of loss was horrible. And it took me quite some time to get back. I think in the end, I was probably stronger for that, sadder and wiser for sure, but also more compassionate for other people who lose their way, who fall from the path, who get waylaid or sidetracked or deviated by those will-o'-the-wisps, the fool's fire, ignis fatuus, which leads them off the path and into the mires and standing pools and all those trackless byways, dead ends, all those halls of mirrors where the person who is on their way to initiation can get lost and almost have a false initiation or a false fall into delusion, in fact. And I see them sometimes still, It could be some raving, houseless wretch upon the street, or some ranting zealot, either in a church or in a community or whatever it is, some kind of paranoid true believer, even sometimes people haunted by their victimhood of the occult conspiracy that they imagine that there is against them. And I look at these people and I feel that compassion, and I look at them and say that there, but for grace, go I. How many of these lunatics, addicts, cultists are the products of these unasked for, unprepared, unencircled, twisted, perverted initiations that went wrong? Those ones that, our modern world, in fact, and their sort of disenchanted secular experience and place in the world has so ill-fitted them for, that when it happens to them, without perhaps they're even asking or realizing or knowing what they have started or what they have set off, or sometimes they're looking for something, but what they find is not what they think that they were looking for. People are so ill-fitted by the world to these things. We do not have the structures to deal with these things. And I get that sometimes, people in that situation are sometimes drawn to me. And I'm sure others have this experience, You end up being a magnet for weirdos because they can see that you have something that they recognize or that they once looked for. And they sometimes come to you and they urgently try to tell you something almost unintelligible, incoherent, but they have a message that they desperately want to pass on, sometimes a warning. And so I usually sit and I try to listen and I try to understand, and I pretend to understand even, because sometimes it's just such total mumbo jumbo. And I sometimes try to sort of give them a password, a watchword, a code word, a safe word or two, just that they might recognize, that might mean something to them, as if just to show, yes, I understand. Yes, you have made a connection. And hopefully through their fog they will recognize that word, that phrase, that concept, and for a moment they might get some little relief, a moment of grace. But then usually they will stumble on. These poor people, products of these kind of perverted or failed initiations, and walk on, walking wounded of this forever war that we can never understand. And that could have been me. People fall into paranoia, addiction, obsession, cults, under the influence of terribly evil leaders or figures who take advantage. But hopefully, with the right circumstances and the right guidance, people can find their way back.